Welcome back. From a screaming eagle to a gentleman regal, from a boot to 10 salute, from a Southeast Asian region to the American Legion, a soldier who would in service of his country find a calling in carrying their fellow comrades fallen. Please join me in welcoming Staff Sergeant SSG Frazier, United States Army.
Retired.
Thanks for coming in, Sergeant.
Okay, thank you.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
Now, you were speaking earlier, you mentioned a couple things that makes this very, very unique. Mm-hmm. We often, in speaking with veterans, you hear about their experiences, but when it comes to like military history, you get into battles and officers and tactics and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. What doesn't get covered, and I've never seen covered since studying this from a little kid, is what happens afterwards. Who cleans all this stuff up? And that's a gentle way of describing what you did. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely fascinating, but you have a storied history because you came from a storied unit, the 101st Screaming Eagles.
Yes, we had a van, an ambulance, a black, we painted the big cross off, and it was all black. And we would go out on the airstrip and we'd sit there. When the bodies came in, we would go pick them up and put them on, and everybody's looking at us because we were carrying these guys out.
Right, yeah.
I also had to deal with Vietnamese dead and the Viet Cong dead, the communist bodies too, put them in the proper place and all of that.
See, here's the thing. This is what you never hear about, you know? I've been studying, reading military history since I was a little boy, and I've never run across anything about this. At most, in some of the books about World War II, for example, they say they hastily dug graves, you know, and they put the soldiers, they attached the bayonet to the rifle, stick it in the ground, put his helmet on top.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
And move on.
That was World War II.
That was World War II.
It was World War II. Because first Cav was the first large influx in one battle at Drang, yeah. When the first Cav first landed.
Drang Valley. We were soldiers, yeah.
Yeah, we were soldiers. There were so many of them. We had reefer trucks with the bodies in them, you know, and we had to pull them out, and they was in all kind of conditions, you know. They were decomposing. There was maggots on them, and we had to wash them, you know, get the maggots off of them.
Sidebar. I'm, full disclosure, I'm a kindred spirit with Sergeant Frazier because I'm a graduate of Mortuary Science College. I think I've told you that. My grandparents owned their own funeral home outside Washington, D.C. for about 35 years. Okay. And my sister and I both went to Mortuary Science College, so I know a good amount of what you're talking about. Okay. But here's the major difference, and it's as different as night is today. I was a young guy, and I was dealing mostly with elderly people. Okay. You know, people at the end of their life cycle. Nice. Yeah. You were dealing with people your own age.
That's right.
Guys that you served with.
2 people came through there that I knew.
That's got to do something to you.
Because the first Air Cav was originally 11 Air Assault Division. The unit I went to to be airborne was 11 Air Assault.
You knew those guys?
I knew some of those guys, yeah. But before the war started, I re-enlisted. And I wanted to get out of the South, different reasons, because there was a lot of prejudice there. So I re-enlisted for Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And I went up there, and I was happy up there. Fort Devens, you know, Boston, and the Canadian border and all that. Had a good time there. And I came off of an assignment on the Canadian border, U.S.-Canadian border training. And when I got back from training, I had my field gear, my helmet, I turned my weapon in and all of that, and I went to my bay, my bunk. And the first sergeant, one of the orderlies came up and said, "First sergeant, I want to see you." And I went down to see the first sergeant, and he said, a twitch, which is a message, came through and said, all airborne qualified personnel have to return to jump status. So I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. That's not where I wanted to be, but that's where they sent me. So I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I was all right there. I'd already been through jump school at that time. You know, I'd been through jump school.
You were already hardcore.
Yeah, I knew what I was
Screaming
doing.
Eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't a Screaming Eagle.
Oh, not yet?
I was in the 11th Air
Oh,
Assault.
excuse me. Yeah.
11th Air Assault. I didn't come to the Screaming Eagles. I re-enlisted while I was in the 11th Air Assault. If I had stayed there, I would have been in the 1st Air Cav. But I didn't know a war was coming. I would have stayed with the 11th Air Assault Division, which was a test. It was a test. That was not an actual combat unit. It was a test to see how the air assault comes in with the helicopters, the Chinooks, and the C-130s and jumping and all of that stuff.
Checking out the new technology.
The new technology.
Yeah.
So I didn't know a war was coming. So my re-enlistment came up. And I said, well, I want to get out of the South. You know, I want to go north. If I had re-enlisted and stayed at Fort Benning, I would have been in the 11th Air Assault Division. But I knew one of my sergeants, I didn't like him pretty much. He was killed. His bottom of his chin was taken off, coming up out of a creek or something like that. Another guy, I was in the mortuary working, and one of the morticians said, that's a hell of a name for somebody to name a child. And the guy's name was Prince Charles Cunningham, and he was from New York City. You know, he was one of these young black guys that was all, you know, just sharp. Mm-hmm. And when I was helping prepare another body, put in a transfer case to be sent back to the States. And when I heard this embalmer from the Philippines, he said, that's a hell of a name for somebody to name a child, Prince Charles Cunningham. And I thought up and I said, damn, I know him. So I went around and there he was on the table with the back of his head shot out. So I took care of his body. I was drafted in 1961, when I was drafted in the Army, okay, at Fort Hollenberg, Maryland. And after being sworn in, I was put on a train and sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And that's where I received my basic infantry training. 8 weeks, I think it was. And then after the 8 weeks of training at Fort Jackson, I graduated from basic training and went to Fort Gordon, Georgia. And they entered me, I went into a signal school. And you won't believe this, but they put me in training to be a teletype operator. Not teletype, but international, no, wait a minute, what did they call it?
Teletype.
Did it.
Oh, Morse code.
Morse code, okay. 2 weeks I stayed there, trying to learn, did it, da-da-da, did it, da-da-da, da-da-da, and writing it down, trying to learn it. I couldn't learn it. So they said, well, you're not going to make this school because you're not learning the international Morse code. Because I couldn't keep up with it. The dits and the dots were confusing to me. So then they decided to send me across the base, the Army base, to infantry training because I couldn't do the did stuff, you know, the international Morse code. So I became an infantry soldier. And, you know, all the things that the infantry soldier, the weapons and all of that stuff. And then when I graduated from that, I was shipped to cross the United States to the West Coast, and I was put on a troop ship in California, and I went to South Korea on a troop ship. Got off at Incheon in South Korea, and I was shipped sent to the DMZ. And I was in the 10th Cav, Buffalo Soldiers. That's where I served in Korea. After serving in Korea, I rotated back to the States. I can't remember what I did then. I rotated back to the States, and I went to Fort Irving, California. And I wanted to be on the East Coast, but Fort Irving, California is in the Mojave Desert. Nothing but sand, nothing but dust, no green, nothing, just the desert. And I was in an aggressor unit where we wore a different type of uniform, and our helmets had a thing on the top, because we were supposed to be playing the aggressors. They sent other units to that base to train the soldiers how to fight an aggressor unit. So all our uniforms were green, and our vehicles were green, not OD green, but a light green. And we trained units coming in from other bases how to fight an aggressive force. So that's what I was trained to do, and it was hot, very hot. And I wanted to get out of the desert. I wanted to go back to the East Coast. That's where my girlfriend was, my future wife was at that time. And let me get my speech back. And the only way I could leave there was that I had to volunteer for hazardous duty, be shipped out of Fort Irving, California. One was to go to EOD school, Explosive Ordnance School, or paratrooper. The paratrooper school was in Fort Benning, Georgia. That was the East Coast as far as, so I volunteered to be a paratrooper. So I had to take a physical test. I had to do so many push-ups. I had to climb ropes that were too big for my little hands to climb on, to go up and touch them. I had to run a certain distance in a certain time frame, and and do push-ups and chin-ups and sit-ups and all that, to prove that I was physically able to go to Fort Benning to be a paratrooper. So I passed all the tests. They sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I went to jump school. And I was assigned to a new unit that was just coming online called 11 Air Assault Division. That's when the Army was trying out this helicopter thing, and they called it the Air Assault Division. So I went to the 11 Air Assault Division. I trained how to jump from helicopters, C-130s, C-124s, and all kinds of Army equipment. And we rappelled from mountains and woods and trees, and rappelled from helicopters, that kind of stuff. And then I was up for re-enlistment. The only thing I wanted to do at that time was get to the East Coast. Okay, so as soon as I came up for re-enlistment, I re-enlisted to leave there and go to somewhere else. I wanted to get up north, and I re-enlisted. I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. So I'm at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and I went to another part of Massachusetts to help train guardsmen or something. And when I came back to Fort Devens, I was unpacking my duffel bag, waiting, to get in my bunk and everything. The first sergeant sent a run-up to my barracks and told me the first sergeant wanted to see me immediately. So I went down to the first sergeant office, and he said, "You got orders?" And I said, "What you mean, what orders?" He said,